realized during this day that it becomes really, really, really important in a quantum age, especially we can say in the next couple of years, to have variable and decentralized systems. So let's talk a little bit more about decentralization, and please welcome with me Magnus Jones, board member of the Nordic Blockchain Association. Welcome, Magnus. I'll have your microphone here with me. We will have a little talk, and obviously we also here will have enough time for Q&A, because you already threw in some sharp questions from your side, so let's see what other people probably will ask you. But first of all, can you give us a short introduction? What are the main goals currently, right now, of the Nordic Blockchain Association?
This is not interesting at all. But the Nordic Blockchain Association is a non-profit organization that supports everyone who has a stakeholder role in towards the Nordic ecosystem. So that's what we're here. We're at the WEF in Davos, where we're hosting several events. We're all over. So we're not only using, call it the Nordic ecosystem, but of the further expansion of the whole thing to create the synergies across not only blockchain technology, but the relating ones also.
Now, our word of this panel, of our talk, is decentralization. And we already spoke in advance a little bit about it. And there is kind of like a risk when you talk about decentralization that it's only a buzzword, that we have like companies that have like 5 points and say, well, it's decentralized, we have a network, but oh, what coincidence, we know all the dots, and it would be very easily hackable. So what is your perspective on that? What can we do, or what do we have to do to watch out that decentralization does not become a buzzword?
That's a very good question. And I think we need to start by addressing it maybe a little differently. With all respect, like we heard here about numbers, prediction numbers. How large is the blockchain market? How large is the AI market? Well, all of these numbers are calculated by, consultants, prostitutes in the suits who has no clue what they're talking about. They just do the mathematics based upon statistical numbers of giving some predictions that they have no clue about. That's what de facto is. I've been a prostitute myself for many years as the Nordic Blockchain Innovation Lead at EY. I know what I'm talking about. I know how this thing is working. That's why I'm sitting here. So in this matter, I'm just saying, I don't care shit about these prediction numbers. Give me the real numbers of users, then I can make my calculations. So let's break this down then towards what we're talking about of decentralization. Is it numbers of nodes? Is it the networks? Is it down to the religious parts of who is supporting which bloody protocol? Let's start with numbers of users. How many crypto users do we have in the world? Anyone know?
5% of the world's population.
Yeah? Some say 500 million, some say 600, some say 700, some say 800, and some claim we're a billion. We're close to a billion at least. Let's say a billion. Let's break it down further. Is that wallets, i.e. where you store unique wallets? Or is it like you have more people? Are we then talking about, what are we talking about? We don't know for sure. We know approximately how many wallets we have in the world. We don't have 1 billion wallets. Can you save your crypto at the custodian? Yes. So we don't need per se a wallet. So say between 500 to a billion. However, do all of these people use crypto actively in the way that we are talking about here? No. They've been to a bloody presentation by the prostitute in the suit where they received a Magnus Jones NFT for attending. Do you think these people are using crypto? No, they're listed as a token holder on the statistical board, 1 billion users. Who are the real users of crypto? The DeFi users. Can we identify them? Oh yes. We have a Norwegian company called Dune Analytics. They trace all protocols out there, on-chain data. That doesn't lie. How many DeFi users do we have here today? Anyone knows? How many? Yeah?
Well, you can't, that's the whole point.
Sorry?
The whole point is it's probabilistic, so no one will not know for sure.
No, but we know active wallets who is interacting with DeFi protocols.
But that doesn't mean people.
Exactly. So my point here is, we know the number of wallets. The top point we have ever been in the world was May last year, where it was 27 million wallets connected to DeFi. After May, it has just peaked straight down, gone down to around 20 million. Now we are on average, the last 3 months, 10 million users. Like you say, if you're active crypto users within DeFi, how many wallets do you have? You have more than 10? You have at least 10. Most likely, many more. No, of course, that's the right answer. But I can tell you, I'm with Interpol, so I'll follow you afterwards. No, my point is, let's say, let's take just say 10 wallets then, just to be at the very cautious levels. I'd rather say 100. 10 million, are we at 1 million? I think then we can say pretty safely, we're not 1 million. We're 500,000 unique people in the world who uses DeFi. Okay, 500,000 going from 1 billion to 500,000. What is the DeFi market then? Is it only Ethereum people? No. It's religious people who believe that Algorand, Solana, Cardano, what the F not is the right word, the right place to be. BTC, BCH, BSV even, I hate to say the word, but some people still believe in that shit. That's what you have. So divide that 500,000 among the religious groups of what they believe in, and you find the unique user bases. Then we're not talking 1 billion. And in so matter, I think it's also important then to understand who is doing the calculations of this one. Because after, when I was attending the WEF fair, I had to go back to Norway on Wednesday morning because BlackRock was coming to town in Oslo. The central bank was coming. DNB, the largest bank, sent 5 people there. BlackRock is coming to Norway. What are they doing? They're talking about crypto prediction markets. Yes, we have done a survey all over. I'm not talking here to talk shit about BlackRock. They're smart as fuck, so don't take me wrong. I'm saying they did a marketing survey where they found that it's 25 million crypto users in the Europe area. That is the market. I said, sir, have you then asked the question, how large of a value do you guys have when it comes to your crypto? No. Okay, let me answer that towards you, because we are carrying out a survey all over the Nordics and the Baltics. And we know this one. And the benchmark there is that 85% of all respondents to this survey, they have crypto for less than 1,000 euros. Is this the dream client of BlackRock? Oh, I think I'll go back and look at these numbers again. Chop 85% of 25 million. That's when you're starting to talk. So my point is, of course, you're talking wallets. And one wallet within DeFi can be very uniquely towards one institutions also. So it's not like I'm saying stupid one-to-one persons. You need to see the big perspective. But we are at least not at 1 billion. We're not at 500 million. We're not at 100 million. We're not even at 10 million active crypto users. This is what we need to take into account when we look at the facts of the numbers and how it scale. And in so matter, to just finish it up, when we talk about decentralization, which is the question, lots of people are throwing out the DAO thing, the decentralized autonomous organization setup. Isn't this great? Instead of having stocks and shares, we're having a token. And this token, it doesn't live in a corporate structure. It lives in cyberspace, outside 12 nautical miles, where there's no one who can tax it, there's no legal rules, and you could do whatever you would like to. That's the mantra. That's where the early pioneers in 2018 came to me at EY and said, Magnus, could I please have a memo that we have no tax obligation, no legal obligations on our DAO? No, sorry, you can't, because you're liable. And in so matter, the mantra that lays there, we're all working for the same cause, hallelujah. It doesn't work like this. It doesn't work like this in the corporate world. You have a stock and a share, but you have hostile takeovers. You have different initiatives. You have different perspective towards how to keep it decentralized or not. So I'm just saying, in the current world situation where we are now in the crypto world, there's so many elements that you could call it easily break down. And I'm not here to preach against myself, because I'm a true believer of the ecosystem, but I think we just need to be honest about where we are and how it's currently structured. So I always say the mechanisms of DeFi is the future of finance. However, ironically, we need some bankers to come in to actually write the codes in order to scale it. So I would say there, the decentralized part, that's where we need to bring the realistic part of things up before we can start to say how it will scale or not.
What an answer. What an answer. Woo! Yeah, applause for that. I mean, yeah. We need to talk facts to move forward. But maybe I'll try to find a positive perspective from your side. Let's see if I can figure it out. But no, jokes aside, can you share with us projects, maybe also from Norway or from the Nordic region, where you say, yeah, that's something I can stand behind. That's something maybe also the whole world could take as a lead or could take as an inspiration. Are there projects that are great?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as said, I'm not here to talk against the industry or anything. And in so matter, I have actually been assisting Norwegian governments on several of these projects. Being the prostitute in the suit, going in, but trying to sell the realistic perspective of what you can do. So this is an old story. I've told it before. I told it here in Davos. I told it other places, but people are not aware of it in general. And that's down to, in 2019, the Norwegian Business Entity Register, the register office, they went out and said, our registers, the centralized siloed ecosystems are registered, how, for example, the shareholder, the stock register is kept, the business entity register. How are they dealt with? Can we talk with other register office directly in Switzerland or Uganda? No, we cannot. So that's when they started looking in, Magnus, this blockchain thing, could that be a layer on top where it actually makes sense? We said, yeah. At EY, when I was there, you know, EY is married to Ethereum. But 2019, what else could you build on? Nothing. So they started building on Ethereum. So they built a solution called Brøk, the business entity registers ecosystem in Norwegian. And there they put the shareholder register onto the public mainnet of Ethereum. Because the head of the business entity register, he said, our registers today, they cannot scale naturally. Then we need some type of decentralized layer. Yes, I'm happy to take the fight. I'm not the preacher towards is Ethereum decentralized or not, but at least it's a protocol layer that others can connect towards regardless of which ERP system or cybersecurity level you are on at government levels. That's the point. So when they did this one, they put all the open source code out on GitHub. Anyone can connect it. So fast forward in 2022, the Norwegian Central Bank also had a project in their CBDC project test team. Phase 4, public report available. Everyone can read it, no one picked it up. There they went in and said, let's go away from hypothetically writing about this CBDC thing to actively do something. So they said, let's use a centralized solution called Hyperledger, but the BESU version of it for the ones who knows this one. That means they could issue, even though it's centralized, ERC20 tokens that is compatible with the business entity register office solution. So they issued test e-krona, dummy money, ERC tokens. They gave that to the banks, the payment providers who was in the project, and suddenly you have a triangle where they could pay for an update to the register office, receive funds back, and it was working. And there, the banks and the payment providers, they said, Magnus, this is kind of interesting because, one, we connected to this layer on top here, regardless of cybersecurity level at the central bank or the banks or payment providers, which would have taken 10 years to implement. So on the layer on top that is decentralized or arguably not, but still it's a different infrastructure. We connected towards it in 3 hours and it was for free. And by the way, when we are sending a test ERC20, doesn't this mean that we can actually transact here with any shitcoin that is ERC20 level? Yeah. So you can transfer a Dogecoin or a wrap BTC? Yeah, and we do it for free. Yes, legal obligations, that's there, but pretty interesting. What else did they do in phase 4? They did something more. Norway, not the largest country in the world, but Norway was actually the first country in the world to test interest calculation on a CBDC. And then if you are a banker, you say, yeah, but who wants interest on a CBDC? That's irrelevant. No, for technical purposes, you need to see if you can have negative interest on it or not. What do you think happened? Well, project manager said, let's go. let's do this one. Coder said, yeah, let's code this one. But the project manager said, no, wait. Well, what do you mean? This is math. We need to do the coding. Exactly, it's math. Have you guys heard about DeFi? They were like, yeah, this decentralized finance thing. Yeah. Do we have solutions out there that is doing calculations? What do you mean? Have you guys heard about MakerDAO or Sky as they're called now? Compound? Aave? Yeah. It's working. It's been working since 2018. Copy paste, it's open source, guys. Oh, so they took the open source code from Aave, copy, slightly amended it into Hyperledger Besu, boom. Oh, it was working. What do you think happened? 2 days later, the Bank of England got notice of this one. They called the Norwegian central bank up and said, have you totally lost it in Norway? Using criminal open source anarchistic code for government purposes. This is absurd. We need a meeting, and that's going to be on Friday. Then it was one Norwegian guy and said, yes, we took the open source code from Aave, and then we just copied it in, then we took 10 minutes, and then it's really working now. Then one guy from the Bank of England said, actually, I think these Norwegians are up to something. And this puts things into a perspective when you need to see the DeFi landscape in a totally different way, because they are, as said, building the railways of the future of finance, but you need to understand how you can leverage on the ecosystem of this one. So this is just, call it, one example of it. And I'm talking a lot, so don't mind. I just would like to mention one more based upon BTC. Can we use Bitcoin for any purpose here? Can we do it? Do you have an example? I have one. No, not for verification purposes.
Oh, identity overlay network for Microsoft. I think they tried it. I don't know.
Yeah, but I can showcase to you one example that is back to 2016, I believe, 2015-16. And that's when the police in Chicago, it was during the big data hype of 2016, if people remember that one. The officers had installed IoT devices in their handguns. They were connected to the internet. So every time a shot was fired, it was then registered in their databases. However, someone said, yeah, that's nice, but you know, that goes into Excel spreadsheet that I can actually go in and just say 27 shots fired, but I just write 2 instead. Then one smart guy said, why don't we, since we have internet connection, just create a Bitcoin wallet in the device and a Bitcoin wallet on the other side. Every time a shot is fired, we send 1 Satoshi, the smallest amount of a Bitcoin transaction, from one wallet to another. Then we know approximately in the time frame of 10 minutes each of when the shot was fired and exactly how many shots was fired, because we cannot tamper with the Bitcoin blockchain. That's impossible. Then you can prove stuff. And this is just one example of how you can actually use something that is, in my view at least, the closest that we can come to anything that is decentralized and also apolitical. It doesn't matter which party you are for or against if you're using the Bitcoin blockchain protocol, unless we know who Satoshi is by tomorrow morning. So I believe that if you see how you could leverage on that part, that's when we can start talking about using decentralization. And I can, of course, argue, is it sustainable or not, and how costly it is or whatever, but at least it's an example of how we actually can use it. When we talk about payments, it's down to that. I think we were planning to end on the geopolitical side, but we can touch on it naturally now. And I would say it's in general a huge problem in society, and they may be all depending on which hat you're wearing, that we have a US concentration relating to it. That might be some weeks ago here in Davos. Stablecoins, 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 connect them with agentic AI. That was the talk all over here. But I was also invited into the roundtable of Circle, the second largest stablecoin provider here. We were 16 persons here. Central Bank of Switzerland, BIS, others were there as well, among these 16. And there I we were talking about how can we make, call it a framework to make payments go peer-to-peer, like you're touching up on. And in so matter, we're talking about who can we lobby with? How can we make the regulation? How can we make it fly? And I said, you know what? Someone has to bring out the elephant in the room. Right now, during WEF, I was staying together with an American, and he said straight out to me, Magnus, I'd rather go and say I'm from Russia than from the US right now. That's how bad it is. And I said, you guys, you have to understand that someone needs to bring out the elephant in the room. And they were like, what? I said, you are a US-based company, regardless of how many EU stables you are issuing. By the way, that's 0.1% of the global stablecoin market. You're a US entity. And if I go to a Nordic bank, regardless of which it is, or I would say in general a European one or a Swiss one, they will never ever integrate a basis as the top layer of using your solution as the preferred protocol layer, because you have a link towards the US, and all depending then if a Danish bank or a Norwegian or another one has a certain opinion towards Greenland, he will shut down your infrastructure. And that's a huge fucking problem, to say it straight out. So it's in the same way that I can say, if you look into, not blockchain, but just tech in general, if the US would have shut down all the relating US vendors, 95% of all Norwegian companies would have to be shut down. They're relying on US infrastructure. So I think if we take that analogy towards, call it your question, we see the US dollar dominance there. It will always be there. It has always been there. But I think you have to see it regionally. Again, during WEF, I was invited to throw my view on geopolitics versus Asia. And if we look into that one, that's also, I believe, interesting, because then the largest stablecoin, if we're talking technical infrastructure, that's Tether. However, and that's US dominated, right? Regardless of which protocol they are on. It's not one Tether, it's many. And the speaker previous to me then said, yeah, CBDCs, the EU one, monitoring China, is then the solution to have someone other private coming in so we are not being monitored? I was like, what are we talking about here? Do you guys know how a stablecoin is actually functioning? It's even more monitoring than a CBDC. Everyone can seize and freeze whatever stable it is there. And they are then forced and controlled by the US governments. That's why Tether runs out immediately when the Genius Act comes into place and US says, of course, Mr. President, we will build a new stable for you. Do you need a new Tether? No effing way. They're just using it to please him. So in this matter, when you look at that perspective and say, Tether, where is their market? More than 60% of their market is relating to China and Northern Asia. And that's an interesting factor towards who can review the data, the monitoring, the metadata. So in so matter, we can ask the question the other way, I believe. Why aren't we using all the EU one? I think we all say that's obvious because it's Chinese government. We don't trust them. Yeah, but why aren't we all using US infrastructure right now? Why are we having the Kivalis stablecoin consortium that started with 9 banks and are now 12, and they're trying to build a euro stable that is much more and different towards the Circle euro? Why are we having this one? Because we don't de facto trust the US either. And that's why I'm saying, I think regardless of when you're looking into payments, you have to see it regionally, where you are in the different places in the world, and also all depending on who are you interacting with. The mantra is that we're sending something peer-to-peer. But the fact, though, when you look into EU, the MiCA regime, the Markets in Crypto Asset Regulation, right now, you cannot even issue a stable in the EU that is yield generating. You're not allowed to do that one. But you might have clients in South America, in Uganda, or other places. And in this matter, you need to have someone who has an operational license in all of these jurisdictions to handle it. Who has this license? Guess what history has a tendency to repeat itself? It is MasterCard and Visa, the networks of networks that provides it there. That's why they are going heavily in. That's why MasterCard already back end are tokenizing more than 30% of all their transactions. They're preparing for this shit. That's where they're coming in and saying, we can actually swap this EU stable legally into, for example, a tether that is not per se allowed by accounting purposes to hold or sell for some kind of purposes in the EU, but that could be the matter of fact that you need it for liquidity in Uganda or in Argentina. So this is my perspective on it, at least, that to scale it, still we need these centralized actors to make it flow, unless you are doing totally, call it off-grid of the banking system and say, I'm not going to do it by accounting standards in the EU or whatever, and sending it peer-to-peer to a friend. Totally different story, but I don't believe that SWIFT will be shut down for these kind of purposes. I think they will rather marry closer together the infrastructure of MasterCard and Visa and still be a key player in the component of having that flow of the ecosystem in a legal compliant way, which is a nightmare, I can tell you, from being a lawyer also. I'm giving you, call it, my perspective overall towards where the different, call it, centralized actors that is supposed to, call it, be replaced by the ecosystem is going to make, call it, their right to have a life still. That's my point. But otherwise, I agree with you on that other side of it, yes.
Like when we look at history, there, like in like so many things, we have cycles of centralization and decentralization. So what can we learn from the past when we look back for the future?
I think in so matter that when you look back, or I think it's a combination of looking back and forward, because again, back to the prostitutes in the suit who makes all these prediction numbers or whatever. And I'm saying it, you know, with a humoristic side of it, but something serious to it as well. And that's down to that most people in general are thinking about blockchain as, call it, one thing. Blockchain is equal to Bitcoin, right? And it's a little diffuse from there, if you ask a person on the street. And if we look into like predictions, if we look into, for example, Gartner, the Marketing and Prediction Bureau, you can hate them, you can like them, you can be indifferent, then try to predict the future. Are they right? No. What are they right on? They're always right on that from the time a new technology enters into force and the market until it reaches up and become mainstream, it takes 10, 11 years. Cloud services, 10, 11 years. Cell phones, 10, 11 years. And if you look into then, and people are saying, yeah, but this blockchain thing, Magnus, Bitcoin isn't this 2008, 2009, 3rd of January or something, huh? Like, yeah, but Bitcoin is mainstream now. Yeah, but what are we talking about? What are we talking about? The banking infrastructure, is that Bitcoin? No, I think that's smart contracts, isn't it? Exactly. When did we get smart contracts? Not 2009. We didn't have a programmability function in the BTC chain then. Taproot came way later. That's a different thing we can discuss. But Ethereum came in 2015 with smart contracts for the first time. Take 10, 11 years to 2015. That's exactly the moment we're sitting in right now. That's why all this shit is actually happening right now. However, then we need to zoom out and say, smart contracts is not equal to all the things that is happening. Is it equal to that we will have stablecoins integrated in all bloody systems by tomorrow? No way. Stablecoins are at year maybe 0 or 1 now. It will take 10 more years before they're mainstream. So in this matter, you have to look into all the subcategories, regardless of that's different levels of AI or other elements that goes in there. Where are you on the maturity level? Some will be replaced, some new come in, some will survive. And if you manage to zoom in on all of these different elements, then I think it's also much easier to call it look back in the mirror to see following that curve and thinking more not 1 to 3 year perspective, because nothing changed in the 1 to 3 year perspective, but 3 to 5 and 5 to 10. Then it maybe makes a little bit more sense, but then you need to also look into what has been there, what has fallen apart, and this is where you can hate it or like it, but where actually the hype cycle of the Gartner is giving you a good mirror to look into.
I somehow have the feeling that you have really the wish in you to shake people and to wake them up and say, hey, we have to have a clear vision on what we're doing. And especially when we talk about decentralization, which is the key topic of this interview, I have the feeling that true decentralization is kind of like a shift of power. And always the institutions who lose power or have to give away power are not very happy with that. Is that fact something that you have the feeling is the base for the battlefield that you're on with your opinion and your screaming?
It's a good question in some matter, and I think all industries, regardless of who you are, or just as a private person, people in general, they don't like change. And that's why if you get a change that comes in from, call it the 1 to 3 year perspective, you fear it, you restrict it, you're against it. But it's more like also how, call it your integration process is. Because as said, I've been forced to sell track and trace solution within blockchains. And I said, yeah, it's a nice to have to be able to trace the banana from A to B to C, but it's not a need to have. Then you need to have customs declarations, freight documents, cargo documents. You need to have the logistical operational side of it. And my clear example there is also on 99.9% of all these blockchain track and trace projects that has been out there since the hype of 16, 17, etc. It's a separate standalone solution. So we manually have to extract the bloody data and put it manually into the system because the data levels doesn't match how your ERP system is rigged and set up. Oh, thank you. I have 6 times more to do now compared to before this blockchain thing. However, in order to scale this whole ecosystem that we're talking about, regardless of you're doing stable or shitcoin A, B, C, or D, or a protocol tracing solution, you need to get it into the layer. You need to get it to the level where blockchain and what it is actually. What is blockchain? A blockchain is a protocol layer. It should be there together with other protocols in existing infrastructure systems to verify data, not store the bloody data. So in this matter, when we up until last year actually didn't have any ERP system providers in the whole world who was integrated blockchain solutions at whatever level it is into their ecosystem, how the F can we scale? That's impossible. And that's why we see it. None of these solutions has actually scaled and been put into action. However, last year, SAP, the large German ERP system provider, they put into a functionality in their S/4HANA ERP system that you could pay with stablecoins. Stablecoins that has been approved by an auditor, by the accountants, by the lawyer. So you sit back office, you just choose drop-down menu, pay with stables, it's accounted for directly, and it's settled. And everything is handled as a protocol infrastructure layer deep down in the ecosystem. Then it makes sense because then that poor back office person doesn't need to have a bloody PhD in blockchain or in cybersecurity or call up the secret police to be ensured that this transaction is valid. And I think when we get to that level, that we get these verification mechanisms, which we heard greatly about previous today, when we get them into the systems, then it really makes sense. But it's difficult to sell it as standalone solutions. We need to make the integration in order to succeed there, and then we can talk about how is it verified. That's a totally different thing about which protocols you're using, which layers, etc. And I always refer to it as, do you shoot a bird with a cannon or not? Do you need it? All depending on the value, what are you verifying? You have different levels. Is it just a QR code on this? Is it a unique QR code? Is it a hologram on it? Is it fluid liquid that you can prove things with? All depending on the value of the good or the need for it. And by that, you will see the different layers and the different need of the different levels of what we can talk about as the basis, I would say, of decentralization, which comes in lots of different layers.
Yeah, it's a very multi-layer, multi-perspective topic. I think we could talk about that. I could talk with you about that for hours, but we come to an end of this interview. We already did a little Q&A in the middle of the interview, but maybe as a last question or as a last thing, you already knew or get to know a lot of the people who are sitting here. Imagine you meet this group again in 1 year. What kind of things would you wish them to look into their own company or ask themselves ourselves when it comes to the decentralized topic? Do you have 3 bullet points, concrete bullet points, that you can give as a suggestion from your perspective?
It's down to that, I would say, it's more of, call it, one thing maybe, and that's collaboration among, regardless of what you're building. Because what we're talking about there is basis of infrastructure. That's what we're doing. And in order to scale that infrastructure, we need different layers, like I talked about, in order to do so. So it's not about one thing, one solution. I'd rather say the collaboration of seeing the values. So to take one example again, to right now I'm building a startup on digital identity. And in SoMatter, we are looking into niche parts of that side. So we also want to verify if you are commencing a transaction, is that a transaction that you actually want to carry out? How can we verify it? So we teamed up with another, I have an Estonian co-founder, so we found another Estonian startup. They were monitoring health data. So they had managed to make an app with the camera where you turn it around and you can measure the pulse and the blood pressure on yourself by just using the camera. Are we into health data? No. But we want to ensure that if you're carrying out a transaction, are you stressed position to see just the microfragments in your face? By that, we can also detect fraud, we can predict it, and we can also stop these transactions by having just a simple PIN2 code that is an emergency code that you can flag that transaction, but the transaction is carried out if someone, God forbid, is holding a gun towards you, for example. So in this matter, if you understand, call it the power of values of rather the collaboration of seeing the totality of the ecosystem, and then again seeing what do you actually need to verify. Is this product everything for the people on the street here? No, it's for high net worth, it's for millionaires, it's for billionaires, it's a niche thing. Then it's high value for them. So again, then it's down to the level of decentralization, like you say. Can you do it more or less centralized? Yeah, in certain areas, it totally makes sense to not share too much cost on it. But if you really want to do something fully decentralized, I would say you have to look back to the Bitcoin protocol again if you want everything decentralized, because that's, again, the only, currently, to my knowledge, apolitical and decentralized, or closest to decentralized at least, element that we have in the world. But again, can everyone use the Bitcoin protocol? No. But for instances, yes.
That's a wonderful sentence to end this panel. Big applause for Magnus Jones. Thank you so much.